Varieties of Capitalism, English. The maritime sector was for centuries a crucial element of the English and later British economy. Interestingly, though it hasn't been a central protagonist in the massive historiography on the origin of English capitalism. Instead, this historiography has focused on the development of proto-industry and the structure of agricultural production. These are telling choices. Interest in the roots of the Industrial Revolution was, since its beginning, a topic of great scholarly activity. Since the middle of the 20th century, the successful capitalization of land has become the main focus of investigation, the unquestioned protagonist of the golden age of Martian British historiography. This was part of a larger pan-European debate on the transition from feudalism to capitalism that started with Marx himself and came to full bloom during the central decades of the 20th century, when it occupied some of the best historical minds of that time. In more recent time, the so-called revolt of the early modernists has, for those working on both English and Dutch economies, further stimulated the analysis of the element of commercial dynamism connected with this period. The topic is massive and the space is limited here. I shall focus on those points raised by the literature on agrarian capitalism, which also have some bearing on employment in the maritime sector. Jane Whittle's synthesis, the early modern drive toward controlling the labor force as follows. In controlling the nature of labor, the legislation had three major concerns other than the control of wages. It sought to strengthen the enforcement of servant contract, to force unmarried casual workers and the unemployed to become servants, and to control the mobility of servants and laborers. A further element is how this influenced general risk management, and here I rely on David Ormrod in his synthesis of issued rates originally by Adam Smith and discussed further by Afner Over. The distinctiveness of English land tenure lay in the ease with which landowners were able to shift rates onto the former. Rack renting essentially involved the conversion of rent from a residual surplus into a fixed overhead, leaving the former to bear the burden of risk and market fluctuation. The English tenurial system, in other words, can be seen as an arrangement for converting agriculture, an inherently risky enterprise, into land ownership, a secure and stable one. The analysis of early modern agrarian, commercial, and labor development, though, hasn't yet to blend into a comprehensive and properly organic analysis of English early modern economic development. This is truly an important gap in the relevant scholarship and thus in our understanding of the dynamics at play and their interaction. As Britain reached global economic primacy in the 19th century, when the modern discipline of history was born, this caused not just the global spread of its own variant of capitalism, but crucially for scholars also set the terms of the debate about capitalism for the following centuries. Let us not forget that the whole debate on capitalism comes from Marx and that Marx was writing in England at the height of the British Empire. How does the maritime sector fit within these issues? At the beginning of the early modern period, England was a profoundly rural and agrarian society. It started to acquire a new political and economic appreciation of the sea only from the second half of the 16th century, under the pressures of war with Spain. However, the stress on the importance of the maritime sector was, since its inception with Richard Hakluyt's work, conceptualized as primarily a political element and later developed into an imperial one. It is worth noting how the maritime sector, in both its commercial and naval element, truly took off with the essential political support of Parliament during the late 1640s and early 1650s. During the profound political and ideological disruption at the time of the Civil Wars. Within British history, this intertwining of the political and economic elements has been a longevary element as the shifting of power between Whigs and Tories, with their antithetical conception of the economy strongly affected consciously and subconsciously historiographic production over the past few centuries. The growing importance of the maritime sector to economic development and growth was very clear at the time, but it was always conceptualized along the peculiar political lines just mentioned. A good example here is the work of Sir William Petty, writing at the end of the 17th century, who argued strongly about the importance of seafaring within both the imperial and the capitalist development of England, declaring his appreciation of seamen as the very pillars of the English nation and empire, and discussing how their work created that of a surplus central to the accumulation of capital. Thus, the whole discussion on the maritime sector contribution developed more along the line of a political economy discourse than of a more technical economic analytical slant. The maritime sector included a varied set of different types of employment characterized by strong regional variation in terms of financial organization and legal customary framework. It included several different typologies of activities. The fisheries dependent on local shared investment, short-range shipping, partially reliant on the seasonal labor of smallholders, here more similar to the agricultural sector, long-distance corporate shipping under the aegis of the trading companies and private trade. Pairing this internal variety of business with the broad exceptionalism of the British maritime world and scholarship, it is no surprise that the sector remained isolated from the mainstream economic narrative. Wage disbursement within the English maritime sector was neatly encapsulated in the formula "freight is the mother of wage." In actual practice, this meant that seamen wages were based not on the work effectively done by them, but on successful completion of the ship's voyage. Thus, in line with Petty's argument, it is possible to argue that the method and frequency of wage disbursement to seamen played a crucial role in the cycle of capital accumulation. That is, denying regular payment of wages allowed capital to be invested elsewhere. Quite apart from the direct connection between freight and wage, other explanations were given for the late disbursement, such as keeping ship appropriately manned, avoiding desertion, and the paternalist approach to seamen, weak in the flesh and prone to waste their earning in a very open discourse of social control, which was the reason most frequently employed by English diplomats in dealing with these controversies abroad. English seamen found themselves at the intersection between the two main interpretative strands about the rise of British capitalism. The new Smithian centered on the rise of market relation and trade, and the productionist focused on the dispossession of small landowners and the rise of wage labor. What emerged from the analysis of their working condition, the legal framework of their employment, and the change in their compensation is the increasing encroachment of their traditional liberties and customary working condition, and the growing implementation within the maritime sector of those paraservice working relations that characterize the development of agrarian capitalism. Thank you.